Hello and welcome to this bite-sized tutorial on simple real-time refractions inside of Maya that run in real time. And of course, real time is always a benefit to us because we get results instantly, and that's always a good thing when we're trying to work in certain type of workflows, including that of previs, which is of course supposed to be a snappy sketchbook way to approach how we previs things for films, television, computer games, and all that sort of thing. So if we can get things running in real time and nice and quickly, then that makes us very happy. So we're going to use a different type of material today, which is of course using, as it says here, the Stingray PBS material, which is a physical based material. And of course, PBS workflows are something that you'll become more familiar with in the years to come. But for today, we're just going to use something very, very simple. It's a very, very simple material. And this is a useful material that you might want to use for things like simple refraction materials on ice, glass, water, and other types of surface. And so it's a cheap and cheerful method that you can use to, as I say, create those basic effects. And it's, of course, something that we can stick in front of a camera, and it causes all sorts of nice warping effects by default. Now, of course, you know, the Maya materials that we've used so far kind of do their own thing. They're very, very simple, and they're also very, very limited, and they're very efficient. However, for this one, though, we're going to introduce something that comes with a little bit more complexity, but it's reasonably easy enough to set up. So let's get on with it, okay? So to begin with, I'm just going to go and make a... I'm going to go and create a sphere. So, of course, create polygon primitives, and I'm going to go to, sphere. There we go. And I'm pressing R, of course, and just scaling that up. And I'm going to plonk it right in the middle of our scene here. And of course, you know, if the material is correct, then of course everything that goes behind this should get warped by that refraction. And of course, if you remember your physics lessons, refraction is of course that effect where light enters a surface and of course is then, due to the nature of that surface, bends in different directions. So of course, whenever we look through water in a river, of course that creates a refraction effect. So things either look a little bit distorted, they look like they're magnified, and depending on the angle, of course, the light is coming from. And that is really, really cool effect. So let's do something nice and simple here this time. Alright, so I've got my sphere, and this time I'm going to go to right click. I'm going to go to add an existing material. Sorry, adding a new material. That's probably the better way to put it. So assign a new material, and of course Maya will open up this window. Let's just make these larger so you can see what I can see a bit better. And instantly I'm just going to go to the Maya tab here, and of course you can see there is a Stingray PBS material very much near the top there. So if I give that a little click, nothing much will change just yet. And of course, at this point, we must remind ourselves one thing that we do need to do is, of course, switch on our hardware texturing. We can do that two different ways. We can click this lovely little icon up here. It's very, very small, with a little textured-looking sphere. A checkered-looking sphere. Or, of course, we can go to shading, and of course, we can switch on hardware texturing down here. Of course, that will give essentially Maya more access to more hardware. Of course, they can do better things. So again, nothing really fancy happening here. It creates a PBS material with nothing fancy going on. And of course, like everywhere else, we probably want to be editing our properties here. So we're going to head over to our attribute editor, which mine's already open, of course, but it's that little 3 stack of fuse boxes, of course, as usual, or Control A on your keyboard. And of course, inside of here, we can see the tabs of the various information of the inputs and outputs, or properties, if you will, of course, attributes to Maya, that make this a unique thing. So here I'm going straight away over to the Stingray PBS one, and of course I could probably do a quick rename here if I was clever, and let's do that. So I'm going to go material, underscore, and we'll call it refraction. That sounds fine for me. So anytime I go back to that, I know that's a material tab. So the first thing we want to do, of course, is just get ourselves started. We're going to go to where it says preset material, and we're just going to stick with something easy like custom, essentially. And you can see there's a bunch of tools already here that we could play with, but that's actually a bit more complex than what we're trying to achieve today. So I'm going to stick with where it says preset material. I'm going to stick with custom. And of course, a dialog box will appear saying loading a preset will delete the shader graph. This action cannot be undone. The answer is yes to this. Don't worry, it doesn't affect anything. So let's zoom in here a little bit further because we want to see this effect happen in real time. I'm actually going to set this off screen a little bit because I'm going to open up a new window. Excuse me. So right away we can see that there is an open shader effects button here, and of course this will give us access to a lovely new window. So I'm going to give that a click. Mine opens off screen, so I'll drag that back on screen so you can see what I can see, and there we go. And this is our shader effects network. I'm just going to shrink that so that it's visible on screen. So whatever I do here, we can see the result essentially happening in real time. And the controls inside of here are pretty much the same as Maya. Hold Alt and middle mouse to pan around, and then of course zoom in and out with the scroll wheel. Now, many of you may not necessarily be quite familiar with a sort of shader network. They're pretty common in 3D packages and game engines, and they are essentially a visual scripting way of working, being using a bunch of pre-made things that are sort of parameters and little bits of code, all in this little list here that we can use to make something nice and simple. So to get started, first thing we want to do is actually select this node here, which is our standard base material. So by giving that a click, and you can see that it actually has its own properties that come up. And the only thing I really want to change here is the blend mode. I'm going to change that to transparent. So of course you can see right over here on the right hand side where it says blend mode, change that to transparent. And that's all good. Excuse me for my coughing, it's been one of those days. And of course, next off, we're going to go over back to our shader network. And for this demonstration, we're only going to keep things very, very simple. And we're going to create 3 material. So if I type variables here, so material, you'll see that there is an input called material variable. So I'm going to put 3 of these in, 2 and 3. My apologies again. So with 3 material variables here, there's a couple of things that we want to do. I want to have a base color, I want to have an opacity, and then of course finally, but never the least, is I want to have a refraction. So we're actually going to work our way up so we can see these effects in full. So starting with the important one, which is our refraction. So you can see when I click this material, this all changes, and I can actually call this material whatever I want. So where it says name, I tend to call it MV for material variable, and I will call that refraction. There we go, looking good. And of course you can leave a little note there, and of course there's a type here. This type drop down is where I want to select scalar, and that's fine. I will use those settings as normal, and that's okay. Everything's looking good. And so next up is just, we want to plug this in. So you can see here, this is a little green icon that kind of tells us that things are good to go. And that's always a nice sign. So let's give that a go. So we want to connect the MV refraction to the refraction area. So I'm going to plug that in there. And we should see a near instant result. But we don't. Why? Because we're using essentially an opaque material. So that's good news. So next up, we want to play with the opacity. So now we need a material variable that lets us play with the opacity. So I'm going to click this material variable, and again I'm going to change the type to a scalar, and it's going to ask me what would you like to do with this. I'm going to leave the rest of it pretty much as it is, except I'm going to give it a new name, MV underscore opacity. This is just good stuff that I can use later at any time. I can see that's ready to go, and of course I can plug that opacity now into the opacity channel. Oh, and look at that, a near instant result. Isn't that quite special? And I really like that. Just instantly, without doing too much work, we now have this refractive material, which just makes things look so much more interesting. And of course we can play with that refractive material as well. So last but not least, I tend to like having some sort of base color that can give me a nice tint, a suggestion of what that color is supposed to be. For this one though, we don't want it to be a scalar. We want this to be a vector 3. And that lets me just choose, essentially, between all the other colors that we might have access to in other tabs, for instance. So I'm going to go for this nice turquoise blue color. And it won't have too much of an effect. It's only like a tint being the base color of our delicious looking result here. And so of course I'm going to connect that result over to the base color in my network. So if I go through these, you can see of course as I can, well better yet, I can select this as sort of if I select the object, you know, we can see nothing really here has changed, but between here I can use these well, I guess these sliders to kind of play with the tint. You can see that lovely blue tint somewhere in the middle, and of course the opacity, I can play with that scalar. We can see how that works. We can have something semi-opaque, translucent, so something kind of bluish and lovely, and of course the refraction, we can see the scalar there as well, and how that we can use that to control how warped everything behind it is. So that is the basics of it. The next thing is we just want to kind of understand how that looks in terms of well, I guess an example is probably the best way to work here. So let's have a look at that. I'm going to close this this network window now because I don't need it anymore, and I won't do anything more complicated than that today. So there is a beautiful refractive material. It's causing us all sorts of cool results, and that's useful for all sorts of reasons, even for making some basic effects up. But you can see it affects everything around it in that view, including the grid, including even if I select things, you can see it actually gets refracted as well, which is very, very nice. So let's show an example of this, okay? So let's move this out of the way. And say we wanted to make a really basic warp material. I'm just going to do something really simple here just to keep things nice and clean. So I'm going to go and create, polygon primitives, and I'm going to go and create a plane. Open up this plane, and I'm going to smooth this a few times. So mesh, smooth. And of course it's going to ask me how many times I want to do that. 2, 3, 4. 4 might be enough for now. Any busier than that, and I think we're going into insane territory. And you can see that things are looking a little bit busy in this screen already. Interesting how that still gets refracted. I think it's just such a nice and simple, beautiful effect. In any case now though, say we wanted to play with this. I'm just going to go and open up I'm going to go right click, and I'm going to go to vertex mode. I'm going to mess this up a little bit with some soft selections. So I've just selected a vertice somewhere in the middle there. I'm going to tap B on my keyboard for soft selection. And of course you can see my brush is pretty big, so I might want to just shrink this a bit. So I'm holding B on my keyboard, and I'm using middle mouse to click and drag so I can see what effect that has. Now I'm just going to go around here randomly and just kind of agitate this surface a little bit. Nothing too much, just up and down randomly, just by hopefully these random sections intersecting with each other creates a accidental ripple pattern. And you can see that's essentially what I'm getting without doing too much work, because too much work is always boring. As they say, work harder. Or no, they don't say that. They say work smarter, not harder. Okay, so not a terribly interesting result, but you'll see what I mean in a second. So I'm going to press Q to clear my keyboard. Of course, that's not going to work in this case. So I'm tap B to disable the soft selection, and then go to object mode instead, and then deselect. And I've got something that's resembling a bumpy pattern, and it works. It looks lovely. So it's a really simple way, and it's probably a little bit higher poly than I wanted, to be honest. But in any case, we can see the effects of this very, very soon. So I'm just going to rotate this. So E for rotate, and then I'm holding J for snap, and I'm just rotating that this way, so it's 90 degrees. Then of course we're going to right click this and assign our existing material, which was material refraction. And look at that. Look at the difference that makes just by having all of that beautifully upset, and how it refracts beautifully, giving us this lovely sort of messed up look. And if that was our camera, we get this lovely underwater looking effect, or ice, or a warped window of some kind. And of course, the further we are away, the more warped that becomes. So it's a really simple, beautiful material that can be used quickly, efficiently, and in lots and lots of different situations. One last situation I think we can demonstrate is we can now create a camera. So let's create camera. I'm going to W that for move. I'm going to put this camera over here a little bit, and I'm going to open up to pane mode. I'm going to go to panels, perspective, camera 1, which is our new camera. And now I'm going to try and move this in front of it. So I'm going to rearrange this a little bit and then switch on my resolution gate, which is this little blue dot with a white box around it. And then we can play with that. Let's move that right in front of there. And of course I want to get that right up in front of the camera. And I just want to resize that so that it fits inside the oh, it's getting a little large. Lovely. So we can see I could probably be a little bit more precise here, but I kind of like having a bit of overspill. So that is now in front of our viewable camera area. Just double check that, by the way, because we know that's a little bit wider than is being shown here. There we go, that's a result. And of course, I'm happy with that. First thing I'm going to do here is delete history, edit, delete by type, history. Then I'm going to go to modify, freeze transformations. And now over here, oh, whoops, my apologies, in my sort of small perspective window, wherever I've gone, I'm going to parent this to the camera, wherever that's gone. You can see it in here somewhere. If you've got better eyes than me, where is it? Camera. I'll have to select it in the outliner. Oh, there it is. So there we go. We can see that that pane's in front of the camera. Actually looks like it's a little bit of distance there. I might bring that a bit closer because I kind of want it right in front of the camera lens. There we go. Smashing. That's a bit better. I can rely on that a bit more. So I'm just going to select this object, shift select the camera, and press P for parent. So now anything I do to the camera will now happen to this. And of course, if I was to film with this now, we're going to get anything that happens in front of that getting warped and mangled in front of that camera. So if I was to rotate this and point it up here, I forgot one thing, hardware texturing. Click, there we go. So we can see that if that was a camera, how well that would work, and it's beautiful. Get that lovely effect. So if I was to animate that quickly, I'll just kind of go over here and press S for a keyframe, and then move over to 120 here, and do that, and S that, and we can see that that sort of short animation hopefully will highlight the effect that has. Things are looking good. Now, of course, there's all sorts of things we can do to improve that material, or, you know, make it less intense or make it more intense. Like currently, I think that's maybe looking a little bit too warped. Things I can do to fix that might be to mesh or edit mesh and essentially look for something to smooth this out a little bit more. One thing I love to do is look for, or is it, I always forget where things are because they change year to year. Average vertices is my one, which kind of just gives us a sort of slightly smoother version of things. And hopefully that doesn't crash the computer. No, things are looking good. But it's only slightly less intense. Other things we can do is like reduce the poly count. So I can go to this and go to mesh and hit reduce. I can also go to something like retopologize. Now that might take a little bit longer given the amount of polygons that this is. But essentially is Maya will attempt to reconfigure that mesh based on the available information and give us a lower poly count while also trying to achieve the same outcome. And we'll see what that leaves us with. You can see here, it's making me think that things are crashed, giving me that horrible little number at the time. So you can see we've actually got a sort of a lower poly mesh now. And we're not getting as good a result, actually, I think. I think it's looking a little bit too sharp there. So I might even be tempted to go to mesh and just average those vertices again. Sorry, there we go. Average vertices. Sometimes that just smooths things out just the right number of times. Always makes my computer afraid, though, I've noticed. Which is never a good thing. I hope your computers are safe to run these sort of things. So just be careful with some of these processes. You might want to play with them or experiment with them somewhere safe first before you commit to using them in your final projects. But yeah, we're getting a slightly smoother result there, which is nice. And I'm getting this very warped underwater look. That's maybe too warped for me, but at least it's going somewhere, and I can work with it. The other way is, of course, we can always move that up and down, or have that sort of that front panel animated as well. In any case, though, I'll bring that to a close. So hopefully that all makes sense to you. All it is essentially one simple material made using the Stingray PBS. There's lots and lots of other features in the Stingray PBSs that are for a different time, should we say. But for now, the refraction materials are there to play with, and they can do something. They can do a lot with very, very little, and they just give you, I think, something to play around with. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense, and I'll catch you another time. Thanks for watching. Over and out for now. Bye-bye.